Imagine yourself doing what you love and loving what you do, being happy from the inside out, experiencing your dreams wide awake, being all of you, learning and changing things to the way you know they can be, living the life you always wanted. Imagine, what will you do with your wild and precious life? The service is based on the poem, A Summer Day by Mary Oliver. At the end of the poem, she asks the very important question, such as, what do you pay attention to? Where have you been? What will you do with your wild and precious life? The service was created in 1999 by the Reverend Rachel Anderson, our settled minister at the time here at UUFRC. We have been organizing the service almost annually ever since. Today's service is about the lives of members and friends of the fellowship. This year, we have 8 speakers that range in age from 10 years old to 84 years young, one from each decade of life. Each participant is thoughtful about life and meaning. In their own words, they will tell us what they have done, what they're going to do with their lives, and what is important to them. Some personally awesome stories. As we listen to the telling of their words, may we remember and make meaning for our own lives. And after the song, please do not applaud until everyone has spoken. Let's make time to make sure that everybody gets a time to speak. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathaniel Edwards, and I like to play video games and run around playing with my brother. I like being with my family and friends. I like reading and drawing and thinking up creative ideas. I also like dancing. What I like about playing video games is that there's lots of variety, so you can switch to another game if you're bored, and the virtual experience looks really cool. I like the music, the story, and how the game works. I like thinking about designing video games and movies. I like running around with my brother because it's nice to have somebody to play with. If you don't have somebody to play with, it gets kind of boring. Running around helps me get my energy out and empty my stomach. Dancing is another fun way to get your body moving, and you get to create new parts of the dance bit by bit. When I was younger, I wanted to be a policeman, a fireman, or a writer. Now, when I think about growing older, I want to write and paint and make art. I also want to be a cartoonist. My biggest dream is to become a writer of books and stories. I care about my family, my friends, and myself. I think there's too much junk food in the world. I wish there was a way to make things just as yummy, but not so unhealthy. The best way to take care of things that matter to me is by protecting them from getting hurt and standing up to people who try to tease my friends. I like to help people by thinking up creative ideas for making plans or solving problems. I like to share the wisdom that if you have something you want to try out, don't be afraid of what it's going to be like, just do it. But sometimes I'm afraid to do it, but I still do it. I like to help other people because it's nice to be part of something, and you get to hear their thanks in the end, which makes you feel good.
Hello, my name is Hannah. As a kid, I always knew I wanted to grow up. I wanted respect, I wanted autonomy, I wanted a driver's license. I wanted to go to college to figure out who I was, and now I can say after graduating that I want to go back. Figuring out who you are is a little overrated, I have to say. Really, what it means is being uncertain and anxious about everything all the time. First, what do I want to do? I've only ever been in school, which is mostly a solitary activity. Now I'm supposed to work 40 hours a week with random people I may or may not like, or who may or may not be good at their job. That's the corporate route I was going to take. I was going to be a software engineer. One thing I have figured out, though, is that an office job for me means a midlife crisis. I've given up being a film director, which I think is maybe too difficult, being a veterinarian, which is surprisingly boring and too difficult, and now corporate is out the window. So what do I want to do? How do I want to live? I have to figure out what tax bracket I'm aiming for. Where will I call home? Which friends will I stay in contact with? How will I make new friends? Which activities do I want to do outside of work? How often do I get to eat frozen dinners? And how am I going to keep track of money? The list goes on. Now, who do I want to be? I want to be happy. I want to be a Buddhist. I would love to be enlightened and no longer suffer, but I also want to practice loving kindness towards myself and others. I want to have gratitude for the steam coming out of a cup of tea. I want to listen to my body and my emotions instead of pushing them away. I want to know that good and bad things happen, and that's the beauty of life. The questions I ask and the answers I give will continue to change. I may not have it figured out yet, but I don't need to. I'm beginning to think that that's the point. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Aurelia Abcouwer and I am 34 years old. In college, when I was working in student life, we did a personality survey called Strengths Quest. The purpose of the tool was that we should be focusing on growing our strengths, not our weaknesses. Among the entire team of residential assistants, I was the only one for whom their top strength was a rare little skill that this tool referred to as connectedness. Now, connectedness didn't mean being popular. It didn't mean the Wall Street kind of knowing some people who know some people. And it wasn't even about being good at relationship building. In this context, it was about seeing the networks in which we work clearly. It was about understanding how our choices and decisions impact everyone around us, and how believing that that functioning of that web was integral to the individual nodes that made it up. Or in other words, an interconnected web of all existence. Makes sense that life brought me here. But that little bit of truth, that I am a part of we, has been the thread that has given my life a bit of meaning and direction. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a blue-collar family for whom much of life was a struggle, both financially and emotionally. My parents were quite young, and they both lost their mothers as children, and they were processing that trauma still as they became parents. My parents did the best with the tools that they had, but I do wish they had been gifted better tools. What my childhood did grant me, though, was a very vivid imagination. I wanted to be a writer, also mom. I saw storytelling as a means of human connection, a way to allow people to experience something outside themselves, to internalize multitudes and feel something. I went to Carnegie Mellon University to study creative writing and psychology, and found my now husband Neil along the way. I also attended grad school at CMU for entertainment industry management, and Neil and I together moved to Los Angeles, and I worked at attempting to build a career in television. But boy, was television not for me. No part of the nitty-gritty behind-the-scenes studio work was human-centric at all. It's a business like any other, and my sort of illusions that story was this unifying entity were dashed by the idea that story was a capitalistic enterprise. I'm not saying that nobody cares, but the people who did care cared in the privacy of their own minds. Confused and unsure about my next steps, I found myself in fandom research, producing multi-million-dollar studies into fan communities for Harry Potter, DC Comics, Warner Brothers, and the CW. And I found in fan spaces multitudes of people finding themselves in story and building community through art and emotion. That people found in fan spaces was truly inspiring. For those of you who don't know, this comes to the heavy part of the story, so Please bear with me if I get a little emotional. For those of you who don't know, our lovely son Milo is a twin. My pregnancy was a complicated story that could be 3 minutes all its own, but I gave birth at only 5 months pregnant. Calvin, our other son, had a grade 4 brain bleed, and we had 19 days with him before we had to say goodbye. And Milo, at only 1 pound 2 ounces, somehow made it home. He could fit in the palm of your hand. He was this big. And we weren't allowed to hold him for 45 days. That's how fragile he was. Never have I felt more of a we than standing alongside Neil, holding hands and making some of the toughest decisions parents can make. The beautiful, amazing, strong man carried the 3 of us, me, Milo, and himself, through the darkest days of our lives, and I cannot express my gratitude for getting to call him my partner. That NICU stay sparked my need to create again. But how do you express feelings of something that is so unimaginable? How do you make it connect? So, I wrote fan fiction. And the success I found there, I was able to turn into a career writing interactive fiction. Through that process of writing, I found myself able to try again, and we have our lovely daughter Louise because of the strength that my writing gave me. Today, I find myself a little bit too busy for writing, being a full-time mom to 2 very active young children. But next year, Louise starts TK, so who knows what life will hold for me then when I finally have a bit of time. But I currently don't feel like that part of my life is missing. I'm capitalizing on my strength of connectedness even right now, speaking to you all. I truly am a part of we in so many ways. We, my family, we, this church, we, our parent community, we, the people of this planet, lonely and longing to be seen. We, the suffering, we, the delighted, we. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Graham Abra. I'm 45 years old. I'm old enough that I have to check that on Google. Prelude. Like with many great pieces of writing, Mary Oliver's poem, The Summer Day, has taken on different meanings as I have encountered it in different points in my life. It is not static. It evolves. Act 1. I'm a senior in high school, which has been a difficult time. I don't know who I am. I'm nobody in a school of thousands. I'm a mediocre to poor student, much to my mother's dismay. A longtime school teacher at the Convent of the Sacred Heart. Her world in the Hearst Mansions in Pacific Heights, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge in Alcatraz with the city's elite, seems worlds away from the fog of the Sunset, Lake Merced, and Lowell High School, where I spend my long yet short teenage time. But it hasn't all been challenging. I have a small group of friends. We are young in San Francisco in the 90s. You couldn't really ask for a better teendom. I get to act on the Carol Channing Theater stage, help put the school paper online for the very first time, go to keg parties in Golden Gate Park, and row in an 8-man shell on the lake in the early morning cold with a god of a coach, fresh from rowing glory at the University of Pennsylvania. In the senioritis-filled days of my 4th year, I happened to be in the room with the AP literature teacher and a few other students as the last set of finals is coming to a close. I did not take AP literature, but I was well read. The teacher tells a story of a summer day in Boston on the Harvard campus. She had ditched her poetry final and was lounging with friends on the green grass with blossoming trees nearby. The professor comes across and sees them all and asks why she has skipped the final. And in answer, she quotes the full Mary Oliver poem, and this earns her a pass. I don't know why, but this story stuck with me. It was part of an intellectual world I was not a part of, but intrigued me. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? There were words that captured all of this, people who thought about it, argued about it, and lived it. It wasn't then, but soon after, I decided I would make the most of the second chance at learning that I was given as I went off to college. Act 2. In medicine, there is a before and an after. In the before, one lives, if one is lucky, with just a passing sense of death and illness as a young person. These are things that occur outside of everyday reality, hard to imagine. You read about them, see them on TV. In the after, the veil is lifted and the frailty of all people, eventually including your own self and everyone you love, is laid bare. My clinical rotation started in the locked psychiatric ward, followed by labor and delivery, then moving on to pediatrics and the surgeons, and finally internal medicine. The simple truth that our health will fail and we will all die became quickly real. There are no patients and doctors, only people playing different roles in a moment. Days and nights blurred and time passed. College friends moved away, got married. My parents grew old. Sometimes the illness of others was crushing. The work was hard and the training often humiliating. The old school Socratic teaching attendings would question until you could not answer. And once your ignorance was exposed in front of your peers, the thinking went, you would never again forget. Tear you down to the ground and then rebuild. I got married and had children. I grew a practice. And the pain of training still lingers, but it's an old hurt now. Thousands of repetitions have made the medicine a reflex. What grows most now is the richness of the life in the people in whom the illnesses inhabit. It is a privilege to be with people and be trusted in their time of need. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Act 3. I stand in my childhood bedroom with my younger brother and father, my mother's cold body on a hospital bed in a room that used to be mine. She had left us years before, Alzheimer's destroying her mind slowly, and now her physical body was the last thing to go. At some point, you forget how to breathe. We all took a collective breath and let it out. Grief had been with us long before this moment. In a very San Francisco final act, my mother had decreed she would be composted. This meant she would ride a bus with a group of other Bay Area lefties up to Washington for the process. I can only imagine the ghostly conversations as they all wound through Humboldt and Oregon with the faint scent of marijuana drifting through the redwoods. The celebration of life took place 2 months later. I wondered what to say. If we are lucky, we know our parents well, and yet we can never know their interior lives fully. My mother was a serious person. She lived well, she was brave, and she lived a life she made for herself with intention. The summer's day seemed the right thing to read to a room of her chosen and biologic family. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Warne, and I'm 58. I am a Midwesterner who grew up in the greater Chicago area, the middle child in a middle-class family. My father was a research chemist at Amoco Oil. My mother was a kindergarten teacher and then a customer service rep at General Electric. My mother was the one who took calls from upset customers with washing machines that wouldn't drain or refrigerators that wouldn't chill. I always thought it took a lot of tenacity for her to keep that job. I was a tomboy as a child. Dad liked taking me to his laboratory at work, so some of my toys were atomic models and laboratory glassware. Otherwise, I liked playing with my brother's Hot Wheels toy cars. Our parents taught my sister, brother, and me to be independent. We had a lot of current events discussions over the dinner table, and my siblings and I were active in debate and public speaking. On the weekends, our family liked to go to museums and go to the theater. My high school dream was to become an engineer and work for the space program. And eventually I did earn a master's degree in mechanical engineering and went to work for NASA in Houston. A few years later, I started what was to be a long career in robotics and automation, and eventually got the opportunity to move from Texas to the San Francisco Bay Area. I've lived on the peninsula for 27 years, and I still love it. For most of my adult life, I've been happily single. I long assumed that at some point I would get married and have children, but my life never took that path, and eventually I came to understand that parenthood was not my gift. At the same time, family has always been important to me, and I'm close to my parents and my siblings. From childhood, I have been a very spiritual and even a very religious person, though I didn't grow up as a regular church member. I studied religion on my own in my 20s, but I always longed for a spiritual community. In 2001, I walked through these doors and immediately felt at home. I've discovered and learned a great deal in this community, and I'm forever grateful for that. One of the things that's always been important to me is to live a balanced life with time for community, friends, and interests outside work, though that can be tricky with an engineering career. I love time outdoors, spent hiking and camping, still enjoy theater and the arts, and I've studied music, history, languages, and religion on my own. Living a balanced life has gotten trickier in the last few years, now that I'm living with my partner Daniel and have responsibilities to elderly parents. I enjoy the puzzle and problem-solving aspect of my engineering job and have felt that my work over the years eliminated some of the drudgery from a lot of tasks. But now, within a few years of retirement, I look forward with excitement to a time when my life won't be so ruled by the routines of corporate employment. I relish the thought of winding up my engineering career and starting my life's next chapter.
Hello, I'm Rob, software engineer. I'm the youngest of three, raised by highly accomplished parents. My father, an engineer, PhD from Stanford, worked for IBM, which from the 60s through the 90s stood for I've been moved. As he climbed the corporate ladder, we relocated 6 times across 3 states, consistently adapting to new communities. My mother, a scientist and educator, Ed.D. Columbia, balanced teaching biology and managing our household, and and my siblings had her as our teacher at our local elementary school. Leisure in our home was just another form of productivity. I never played or watched sports with my parents, unless you count scuba diving. Time with Dad meant carrying his toolbox and helping with projects, electronics, cars, appliances, house renovations, or whatever else was on his list. Time with Mom meant tending our sprawling vegetable garden, cooking and baking, crafting, or raising crayfish in the basement in our kiddie pool. Even travel had an air of accomplishment. Our family station wagon was a small plane, time-shared with IBM and others, but with my parents as the pilots. As the youngest, I was always in the back with the luggage. In our family, what mattered most was what you accomplished, and that you did it well. As my siblings often say, we Davises live to work. Maybe a little backwards there, but now as I approach my mid-60s, I find myself uneasy about the next phase of life. Lately, I've noticed my ability to focus, learn new technological skills, and push through challenges has waned. I blame the internet, or my phone, although probably age might have some role in it as well. The thought of retirement, leaving behind a job I love and excel at, is unsettling. Without the structure of a job keeping my focus on coding and my skills sharp, I fear I'll lose them. Work has provided structure and purpose for so long that stepping away feels like leaving a core part of myself. Without work, where will I find my sense of purpose and accomplishment and the discipline to do things, to push myself to do them? And who will I be, and how will I fill my days? These are the questions I find myself grappling with now. Perhaps those in your 70s and 80s and beyond who have already walked this path can offer some insight. I look forward to your answers.
I'm Nancy Goodban, and I don't know that I have the answers. I love these stories. Well, I've made it 3/4 of a century, so that means something, I suppose. Yes. So what's my story? I have a lot of little stories, and I suppose they do add up, so I will give you a couple of snippets. I mean, I basically grew up in a middle-class family in Walnut Creek, California. We went to the local Congregational church. My dad was a chemist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and my mom was a homemaker. They're the ones that taught me to stand up for my beliefs. I remember my dad didn't buy war bonds for the Vietnam War, even though he was expected to. He was the acting director of the lab, of the USDA lab at that time. And I remember, too, he taught me to respect people, not by telling me to do that, but by showing me how to do it. And our mom took us to civil rights events and got us involved in a lot of youth group activities. So I ended up being involved in political causes ever since high school. I did help stuff envelopes for Mario Savio and the free speech movement in Cal. Yes. And when we still did envelopes. And I was arrested as a teenager outside the San Francisco Federal Building protesting the Vietnam War. But I was a good hippie, too. I dropped out of high school my senior year. I went to Cal for almost a year. I dropped out again. I lived in a box truck for a while and in a half-size purple school bus for a while, and then on a houseboat with my boyfriend in Bethel Island in the Delta, which is beautiful there. And of course, in the 60s, there was a lot of drugs, too. Sorry. I did end up back in college a few years later, and I remember talking to my dad, because I wanted to become a physicist. That was my favorite activity after I got out of college. And when I was going to graduate school, that's where I wanted to apply. And he sort of, as we talked about it, made it clear that I might be happier doing something that worked more with people, so I applied in psychology programs, and I got into one. And so I ended up I got into several, but I ended up going to graduate school where I met my husband, where we've been married 45 years now. So I graduated from there too. So I did graduate from Harvard eventually. Needless to say, my dad was very relieved that I'd straightened my life out, because my first year of graduate school was a little scary for him when I came home and said that we had signed a petition to our professors complaining. And he thought, oh my God, now she's going to do it again, drop out again. But I didn't. But it hasn't always been easy. I think our biggest challenge was infertility, which I totally honor and respect anyone who has dealt with that. My husband and I wanted to have children. We tried IVF. We moved to California and decided to adopt, which was the best thing that ever happened to us. We now have 2 grown children and 2 little granddaughters who are the love of our lives. I could never wish for more. But my biggest sadness really is very real to other people who can relate as well. My sister got into Scientology, my younger sister, 50 years ago now, a little bit more than that. It's truly a dangerous cult. She's been locked up behind barbed wire in Hemet at their gold base down in Southern California. And the last time I saw her, she was a physical and emotional wreck. Right now, she's not talking to me or emailing. I still look for ways to fight that cult. But here's the thing. I have more time behind me than ahead of me. I've had plenty of adventures. I don't regret anything. And time marches on. I think all of us are just trying to make our way through life, and I'm just kind of running to keep up. I just hope truly to make my world, the world, a little bit better place for my granddaughters when they get older.
As the oldest speaker today, I must say that most of my wild and precious life is already past. Although it may not be wise to say past to someone my age. My life began 84 years ago in Kentucky, the same state as Abraham Lincoln. I was born upstairs over a vacant lot. I learned this as an adult when my mother took me to see where I was born. And yes, it was then a vacant lot, and I was born in an apartment above it. My first elementary school was named after Robert E. Lee, but we soon moved to Florida. For 18 years, my church taught me that people who didn't believe as they did would go to hell. Thankfully, my college days freed me to think otherwise. I earned a bachelor's and a master's degree in 4 years, after which I did as many other women of my generation did. I became a teacher, and I got married. My husband was a Marine officer who used to tell people that when he was recruiting, he wore a campaign hat like the one Smokey the Bear wore. And he thought maybe I had mistaken him for a forest ranger. I was an adequate Marine wife for almost 15 years, and the best part was the birth of my son and my daughter, both of whom are now wonderful adults. I worked when it fit in with my husband's military career, including teaching at the American School in Tehran, Iran, when my husband was deployed elsewhere. Although the marriage ended, my ex and I are still good friends to this day. Next, I worked for the city colleges in Chicago and then the Great Books Foundation. When I considered switching from education to law, some of my friends dissuaded me, saying they didn't think I would still be a nice person if I became a lawyer. Of course, I tried to prove them wrong, and I earned my law degree. In middle age, I certainly didn't expect ever to marry again, but about the time I took a teaching job at a law school in San Diego, I met my kindred spirit, Marvin Friedland, also a lawyer, sitting in the back. and we've been married now for 34 years. We moved to the Bay Area, and for 4 strange years, I worked at a law school with a beastly boss. So I killed him off. No, not really, but it led to the publication of my first mystery novel with the Shakespearean title, First Thing, Kill the Lawyers. I wrote 2 more mysteries that didn't quite make the bestseller list, but privately I will tell you about my books if you really, really want to know. Back in Southern California, I taught at another law school where I became the director of the Center for Children's Rights and also represented abused and neglected children under appointment by the California Court of Appeal. About a decade ago, my husband and I retired and moved back to the Bay Area to be near my daughter and her twin children, my grandchildren, of course, in San Carlos. We enjoyed 5 years near them before she took a job in health services with the University of Texas and moved to a lovely home at a fraction of the cost of living in the Bay Area. My son lives in Virginia, where he's the director of the National Museum of the Marine Corps. Now, my husband and I enjoy reading, music, travel, community, volunteer work, and various pleasures of the Bay Area. Recently, we have added to our list our new friends at UUFRC, and the rest is history. But I end with a footnote. As with every year, famous people are born, and 3 of them happen to have been born the same year that I was born. Dr. Fauci, Al Pacino, and Nancy Pelosi. They're all still here, and so am I.